My name is Bella, and life has a way of teaching you who's really in control. Not long ago, I would have eagerly told anyone about my marriage to Willie, brimming with the joy of a newlywed. I truly believed that leaving my promising career at Ventic Tech to focus on our marriage was the right decision. Love, after all, is supposed to be worth more than money, isn't it? Ventic Tech had its quirks, but it also had strict policies, especially about workplace relationships. Once Willie and I tied the knot, we were thrust into an awkward spotlight. Our boss, Gary, wasted no time delivering an ultimatum, with all the theatrics of a reality show host. That evening, our conversation felt like a scene from a high-stakes drama. Blinded by love, I caved. The next day, I handed in my resignation and walked away from a career I had worked so hard to build. Fast forward to today, and here I am, cleaning up spilled cereal because Willie, ever the soon-to-be promoted, can't manage to aim for his bowl. Didn't your mother teach you better? I shout, half joking, toward the living room. My words disappear into the walls, his defensive reply arriving just as invisibly. I let it go. It's not worth another argument. Once, we teased each other with ease. Now, every conversation feels like navigating a minefield. Hours later, Willie is glued to the couch, the TV casting a dull glow over his indifferent face. I glance at the untouched dinner table, the remnants of what we once had haunting the silence. Are we going to talk? Or is that couch your new lifelong commitment? I ask, forcing the words out. About what? His reply is sharp and dismissive, without even a glance in my direction. I count to 12, clinging to patience. About us, about where this mess is heading. My voice cracks slightly. He shrugs. That shrug, heavier than any shout, fills the room with a suffocating silence. The TV chatters on, oblivious to the collapse happening within its reach. That's when it hits me. Our marriage, once so sturdy, now feels like a house of cards collapsing under its own weight. The bond we'd built is crumbling, piece by piece, and neither of us seems to know how to stop it. Life, with its cruel irony, has turned our plans and dreams into fragile remnants of what once was. I linger, watching him. The man on the couch feels like a stranger, a distant passenger I might pass on the street. The shift from warmth to indifference was subtle but devastating, like the first bite of frost signaling the end of summer. Later that evening, I prepare his favorite meal, steak, seasoned and cooked just the way he likes, or so I thought. As he enters the kitchen, his heavy footsteps foreshadow his sour mood. He scans the table like a predator sizing up its prey. He picks up a piece of steak with his hands, ignoring the utensils beside him. Is this the best you can do now? His tone is gritty, like sandpaper. It's slightly cooler than usual, I reply cautiously, referring to the temperature. Not what? He snaps, his glare cutting into me. I bite my tongue, holding back the flood of thoughts. Speaking up would only make things worse. When I say I want my steak hot, he continues, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. I expect to feel the life leaving it as I cut in. This, he jabs the steak with his fork, is already dead and gone. His words, devoid of any shouting, carry a venom so sharp it leaves me hollow. He pushes the plate away and meets my gaze for a fleeting moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of contempt and resignation. Forget it, he mutters, turning away, grabbing his keys. He delivers a final blow. Fix your mistakes, Bella, or next time, it won't just be dinner getting tossed out. The door slams shut behind him, the echo punctuating the end of what little joy remained in our relationship. I stand there, staring at the uneaten meal, wondering how we reached this point, and if there's any way back. I stood motionless, staring at the door Willie had slammed shut behind him. The sound still echoed in the silence of the apartment, reverberating like a final punctuation to an unspoken truth. I exhaled slowly, glancing down at the abandoned steak on the table. Its cold, lifeless state mirrored my own feelings, discarded and forlorn. Each step toward the trash can felt heavier than the last, a somber reminder of what I was throwing away, my effort, my care, and the fragile hope that things could still change. To the outside world, we were the picture of a perfect couple, admired by friends, praised by his parents, but behind closed doors, the reality was far from ideal. Willie's demands had become relentless, chipping away at my self-esteem with every passing day. My life revolved around seeking his approval, which had grown as rare as sunlight in a storm. Tonight was no different. The dinner table became a stage for his critiques. "What's this?" he asked flatly, pointing at the plate of steamed broccoli and grilled chicken I had set before him. "Dinner," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Broccoli again? Do you know how to make anything else?" His words dripped with disdain as he pushed the plate away like it was contaminated. Suppressing a retort, I offered, "I can make something else." His sneer was immediate. "That would be a first." The sting of his words fueled a simmering anger within me, but I turned back to the kitchen. Before I could start anew, his sharp voice cut through the air. "Where are you going?" "To cook," I answered, barely keeping the edge out of my tone. He stood abruptly, the screech of his chair grating against the floor. "Sit down. Let's not pretend you have other plans. Your world revolves around me, remember?" His words were a leash, yanking me back into the reality I'd been too afraid to confront. "Yeah," I murmured, defeated, returning to the table. Later that night, as silence filled the apartment, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The weight of unsaid words and unmet dreams pressed down on me. This wasn't a partnership, it was a prison, built on dependence, fear, and a facade of perfection. But life has a way of intervening in unexpected ways. One cold, ordinary day, I slipped on a patch of ice while carrying groceries. Pain shot through my leg, sharp and unforgiving. A few bystanders rushed to help, their concern a stark contrast to the indifference I had grown accustomed to. At the hospital, a doctor confirmed what I already suspected: my leg was broken. "It's broken," he said matter-of-factly, as if announcing the weather. The real pain wasn't from the injury but from the dread of telling Willie. I sent him a text, "Broke my leg." At the hospital, his response never came. That night in the hospital was cold and lonely. The nurses were efficient but distant, and the stale coffee did little to warm me. By morning, I was discharged with crutches, a cast as stark as the snow outside, and a pile of instructions. Willie was waiting when I got home, his face stormy, no concern, no questions about how I was feeling. His first words were, "Where's dinner?" Standing there on crutches, my leg immobilized, something inside me snapped. "What do you think happened? I went dancing? Look at my leg," I yelled, my voice cracking under the weight of all I'd held back. He barely flinched. His only response was a dismissive wave of his hand as he turned away, muttering about how I should have been more careful. In that moment, the full extent of his selfishness and neglect hit me like a tidal wave. The life I had tried so hard to salvage wasn't just broken, it was unsalvageable. Willie's tirade made his feelings painfully clear. My broken leg was, in his eyes, an inconvenience I had inflicted on him. "You always have excuses," he spat bitterly. "You can't even do the one thing you're supposed to, can you?" I stared at him, astounded. After a harrowing night in the hospital, his only concern was dinner. The sheer indifference stung more than my injury. The air between us felt as cold as the ice I'd slipped on. A chilling confirmation that this was more than a physical wound, it was a fracture in our relationship, one that had been forming for years. Despite my trembling hands and aching body, I limped to the kitchen and began preparing dinner. Each step felt like an eternity, a cruel mockery of my efforts to maintain normalcy. Near the trash bin, overflowing from a day of neglect, I hesitated. I knew Willie wouldn't let it go. "What's this?" he barked, his sharp tone cutting through the tension. "You're home all day and can't even handle the trash?" He stormed over, fury radiating off him, and with a swift kick, he sent the contents sprawling across the floor. "Clean it up," he commanded. My hand shook as I knelt down, not from the physical pain, but from a deeper, more profound hurt. That night, sleep eluded me as his harsh words echoed in my head, mingling with the hot sting of tears. By morning, nothing had changed except my resolve. The kitchen table was now adorned with divorce papers. As the coffee dripped in the background, Willie stumbled in, bleary-eyed and reeking of alcohol. "Morning," he growled, his voice rough. "What's for breakfast?" Without a word, I pushed the papers toward him. He glanced down, his lips curling into a mocking smile. "You serious?" he scoffed. "As a heart attack," I replied, my heart pounding but my voice steady. He laughed, loud and dismissive. "You ain't got the guts." "I already filed," I countered, meeting his sneer with a steady gaze. "Just need your signature." He leaned in close, his voice low and venomous. "You think you can survive without me? You're a broken bird, can't even take out the trash." "I'm done talking, Willie," I said firmly. "Sign the papers, or I'll have the authorities force you to." His face twisted with rage, but he grabbed the pen and scrawled his name, each stroke heavy and deliberate. Tossing the pen down like it burned him, he sneered. "Good luck, darling, you'll be crawling back before the month's up." But I wouldn't, I couldn't. This was my line in the sand. The moment I refused to accept any more of his cruelty, Despite everything, I smiled. Those signed papers felt like my first step, on crutches, maybe, but toward a better life. Crawling's not my style, I murmured. The next morning, an eerie silence greeted me. Over coffee, Willie casually mentioned the property split. Got a lawyer, he said, his tone as commanding as ever. You coming with me? Still healing, with my choices seeming limited, I nodded. Willie helped me into the car, his actions oddly gentle as he propped up my cast. Everything felt strangely normal as we drove, the city skyline shrinking behind us like a distant memory. Suddenly, he pulled over to the side of the highway. The tire might need air, he mumbled, stepping out to inspect it. Leaning heavily on the car, I followed, unsure of his intentions. He pretended to fuss with the tires, his movements calculated. Then, without warning, he jumped back into the driver's seat. Before I could react, he hit the gas and sped off, leaving me stranded. I stood there, stunned, watching his car vanish down the highway, the sound of the engine fading into silence. I gripped my crutches tightly, disbelieving but strangely resolute. Alone on that desolate stretch of road, I realized this wasn't the end, it was the beginning of my freedom. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and called him in desperation. Willie's voice came through cold and smug. Come back, I yelled, my voice cracking with frustration and fear. He just laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. This is what you get for trying to divorce me, he sneered before hanging up. The line went dead, and I stood there, the taillights of his car fading into the distance, alone on the side of a desolate road. The winter chill gnawed at me, a cruel echo of my abandonment. Cars sped past, their drivers oblivious to my plight, their indifference stinging as much as the icy wind. Minutes turned into an eternity until finally, a rattling Jeep truck pulled up beside me. To my shock, it was Gary, my former boss. His gruff, familiar voice broke through my haze. You look like hell, Bella, he said, his concern cutting through the cold. Why didn't you call someone? I shrugged, the weight of the day pressing down on me. Thought I could handle it, I murmured, ashamed of how wrong I'd been. Gary's expression darkened. He left you here, with a broken leg? That man's a coward, he growled, helping me into the warmth of his Jeep. The drive to Ventic Tech was quiet but heavy with unspoken understanding. Gary guided me into his office, where he handed me a steaming mug of coffee. The warmth seeped into my frozen hands, thawing both my body and my spirits. Thanks, I said softly, taking a sip. Gary paced, his agitation evident. I can't believe that bastard, he muttered, more to himself than to me. Then, turning to face me, he asked, what are you going to do now, Bella? I don't know, I admitted, the uncertainty of my future looming large. He leaned forward, his expression serious. We need you back here. The team hasn't been the same since you left. A flicker of hope sparked in my chest. You serious? As a heart attack, he replied. You're the best we ever had. I should have fought harder to keep you. I glanced down at my cast. Might be tricky with this. Gary waved off my concern. We'll manage. I'll wait until you're ready. No excuses. No saying no. I smiled faintly, touched by his belief in me. I'll think about it, I said, though deep down, I'd already decided. The tension in the office was palpable as Willie stormed in the next morning. His boots thudded across the floor with less certainty than usual. When he saw me standing beside Gary, his face paled before quickly hardening into a sneer. What's this about? He barked, his voice edged with defiance. Gary gestured to a chair. Sit, he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Willie remained standing, crossing his arms in a show of bravado. Willie, Gary began, his gaze cold and cutting. I've seen some poor decisions in my time, but what you've done takes the cake. Willie's eyes darted to me, his expression a mix of anger and fear. What lies has she been feeding you? No lies needed, I replied calmly, just the truth, recorded loud and clear. Gary slid a recording device across the desk. Care to listen to your greatest hits? Willie's face went ashen. You can't fire me over this, he sputtered. Oh, I can, and I am, Gary shot back, his voice like steel. Willie's desperation mounted. I'll sue. Go ahead, I said, my voice cold, but you'll lose. I've got all the evidence I need, and you've got nothing but empty threats. Gary stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor like a declaration of war. Get out, Willie, you're done here. Willie stormed out, defeated, and the weight of his departure lifted from my shoulders. In court, the judge's gavel fell decisively. This court grants the separation and orders compensation to be paid, the judge declared. It felt like the first breath of spring, chilly but full of promise. Back at work, I settled into a rhythm, every keystroke a step toward rebuilding my life. My colleagues' greetings were warm, their support unwavering. "Feels weird, huh?" Harold said one morning, leaning against my desk. I smiled. "Weird doesn't cover it. Feels like I've come back from the dead." He chuckled. "Zombie Bella, back for revenge?" "Something like that," I said, grinning, "but this time, I'm not taking crap from anyone." "That's the spirit," Harold said, his nod full of encouragement. This wasn't just a fresh start, it was a reclaimed life, and I was ready to live it on my terms.